Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Today being Monday, the 28th of November 2016. And if you're keeping count with me, we're 176 days away from elections here in the Cayman Islands, 24th of May 2017. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I trust that you all had a wonderful weekend, still enjoying the Christmas breeze that we're getting. Of course, I think for some local fishermen, the weather has not been that great for them to get out there and do their fishing. And of course, the what we call queen fish, some people speak of them as wahoo, are running now as well. And of course, there will be a higher demand for fish during this time of the year. Lots of office parties will be taking place in the month of December, probably even in the month of November, because a lot of firms, a lot of companies try to get it out of the way early because there's so much going on. So hopefully the weather will change and our local fishermen will be able to get out there and earn a living and have some monies in their pockets for Christmas as well. Of course, you're listening to For the Record, a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, a show that is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I have the pleasure of being your host. My name is Record Nov, and you're welcome to join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. Phone lines are always open. There's always that beautiful voice of Miss Susan Watson waiting to take your calls. You can call us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flow. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us at 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, you can email us at fortherecord. That is one word, for the record, at candw.ky. For those of you who sometimes call in early, I want to set some ground rules specifically just for this morning, because the guests that we have on, there's a particular program that we want to follow. We want to pass out valuable information on to you, and we will open the phone lines after we take the news break, which will be around about 8:15, 8:20 this morning. So without any further ado, I'm pleased to advise you that we have in the studio with us this morning Mr. Charles Clifford, who is the Collector of Customs. We also have two acting Deputy Collectors of Customs, Mr. Kevin Walton and Mr. Jeff Jackson. Gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. I can say welcome back to For the Record for Mr. Clifford, and for Mr. Jackson and Mr. Walton. Welcome to For the Record.
Thank you very much, Mr. Connor. Good morning to you and good morning to your listeners. We're very pleased to be here this morning. We do have, as you've indicated, some important information to pass on to the public. Just so the public is aware, Mr. Walton is currently responsible for the revenue collection portfolio, and Mr. Jackson is responsible for the border protection portfolio. So I wanted to talk a bit about some of the objectives that I had set when I first came into the department just over a year ago, and some of the achievements that we've managed to essentially put in place since I've been collector, with the help, of course, with the assistance as well of the very hard-working customs officers and the administrative staff that essentially supports all of our efforts. So there were three primary objectives that I set when I came in. One was maximizing revenue, the other one was succession planning, and then the third was strengthening the relationship with other law enforcement agencies. In terms of maximizing revenue, that was more about essentially plugging some of the gaps in the system where people were able to cheat the government out of money that they should have been paying. And we're pleased to say that we've already completed our annual report for the past financial year, and we were able to collect some $10 million more than we had projected. So we collected $161 million in the last financial year. In terms of succession planning, we've had a a number of senior officers who have retired. Miss Emily Wilkes, who was a deputy collector, Mr. Collie Powry, who was also a deputy collector, and Mr. Langley Powry, who was the training manager. These are all individuals who had in excess of 35 years service in the Cayman Islands government. So we wanted to take the opportunity today to thank them for their service. And they certainly made a lot of sacrifices and contributed a lot. And we want to sincerely thank them for the service that they offered to the Cayman Islands. We have also been meeting more frequently with our other law enforcement partners in immigration and in the police. And I wanted to certainly thank Deputy Commissioner Anthony Ennis, who was acting commissioner for some time, and the acting chief immigration officer, Bruce Smith. These are all important partners for us in law enforcement. And we have a new commissioner now, Commissioner Byrne. And while I've met him already, I'll be having a more detailed meeting with him very shortly. And I'm confident that we'll be able to continue and improve on the collaborative efforts that we've put in place thus far. I mentioned that we've had some recent retirements. We also had some promotions last year. In December last year, we had Mr. Philip West, who was promoted to assistant collector. And Mr. West is certainly one of our bright and shining stars. And we also had two other officers who were promoted to senior customs officer, Mr. Newton Powry and Miss Jacqueline Russell. So with that, what we also have coming up in the first quarter of next year would be 10 additional vacancies for promotions. So those would be the two deputy collectors posts that are currently available, the positions that Mr. Walton and Mr. Jackson are currently acting in. We have 4 assistant collector positions that will be vacant and 4 senior customs officers positions. So you will begin to see when you hear about all of those vacancies that there's a great opportunity building on the promotions from last year and the promotions that are coming up shortly, that we will begin to essentially roll out our succession plan for the customs department. And I certainly look forward to seeing that take shape. And I think these are exciting times for the customs department. We do recognize, though, that we do have some customer service issues in various areas, particularly with respect to revenue collection. And we've had some complaints about that, so we want to talk about that today. That is primarily down to the IT platform that we're using. So we recognize that is the issue, and we're working very hard to fix those issues. I know that my officers are on the front line, so they take the brunt of the frustrations from the public. And I want to say to the public that I would encourage them to recognize that this is primarily an IT issue that we're working very hard to resolve. And we hope that in the not too distant future, we will be able to reduce the waiting times at our collections section. But I know that those officers, when you heard me talk earlier about collecting $10 million more than we had projected, that is primarily down to the diligence of the frontline officers. Of course, we have had increased development in Cayman, which means additional imports. So it's a combination of that and the diligence of our customs officers that have allowed us to exceed our revenue so significantly.
Yeah. Can we stick with the whole issue of succession planning for a minute? And you mentioned the fact that it's just over a year since you have been in the post. And we certainly saw how challenging it was at first to fill the collector of customs post. There were, many delays, many efforts to fill that post. Eventually it was filled by you. But as far as succession planning is concerned, and you would not have laid the foundation for that, but you certainly went in and allowed it to happen. Something that I believe other government agencies, government departments can learn from as well, because it seems as if you've been able to make a seamless transition in terms of the hierarchy when it comes to customs. Let's talk a little bit more about that, if you will.
Yeah, and I think, thank you very much for that, Mr. Connor. I think that has been enabled by the fact that we have many talented officers in the middle management of the customs department. So these are officers who simply needed the opportunity to lead at the more senior management level. And I can tell you that the performance of both Mr. Jackson and Mr. Walton is very impressive in their respective roles. And I certainly want to publicly thank them for taking on the additional responsibility that they've taken on in these acting roles. But we have many other officers throughout the organization who are very able, very willing, and have natural leadership qualities. One of the things I did when I went into customs was I took the time, and I can tell you it took almost 5 months to meet with each officer individually. And I spent time with each one of them talking about their goals, their objectives, their views on the department. And in every one of those sessions, I encouraged the officers to further their education, because that's the world we're living in today. We have to make sure that we improve our skills, our personal skills. We have a personal responsibility for doing that. And so I've encouraged that, and I'm pleased to say that while we had some officers undergoing further education before, I've seen that there's a new appetite for that. And that is encouraging. To the extent that we can help as a department with that, we're certainly prepared to do that. So I think it all bodes well for the future of customs. And I've said, and these guys can confirm to you, I don't think that I need to be in customs any longer than I need to be. And so I wouldn't certainly be sitting there blocking others from advancing further. When it is time for me to move on and for others to move up, then I think there may be something else in government for me to do, or perhaps something back to the private sector. Or, as you know, OC, I've been in government for quite a while. That's where most of my work in life has been. So at some point, we need to think seriously about retirement. So
tell me about it.
But I notice you haven't been able to really do that. So yeah, I mean, those are all things that I'm considering. But I think that I'm confident that we have the talent within customs to fill the positions that we have coming up.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break now, and when we come back, if you want to, Mr. Clifford, we can talk about the passenger processing system. I think most that has been featured in the news recently. So if you want to talk about that,
I don't want to dominate the show. I want to give Mr. Jackson and Mr. Walton an opportunity. So I'm going to shut up for a while when you come back.
Certainly, folks. I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Collector of Customs, Mr. Charles Clifford, and we have two acting Deputy Collector of Customs, Mr. Jeff Jackson and Mr. Kevin Walton. Please stay tuned. For the Record, we'll be back immediately after this commercial break. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I have the pleasure of having in the studio with me this morning Mr. Charles Clifford, the Collector of Customs, and Mr. Jeff Jackson and Mr. Kevin Walton, two acting Deputy Collector of Customs as well. We're going to talk about the new passenger processing system, and Mr. Clifford, the Collector of Customs, has been quoted as saying that the simplified process recommended by the World Customs Organization and commonly known as the red/green system facilitates the flow of arriving passengers and their baggage without reducing the effectiveness of customs control. So let's talk about the new processing system. And at some point in time, I'd like you to touch on also how the airport expansion project, when that is completed, how will that positively impact the customs department as well. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. As I said just before we took the break, I've talked quite a bit already, so I want to give the two acting deputy collectors an opportunity to speak, and specifically to this issue, I'd ask Mr. Jackson to address it because he's responsible for border protection.
Mr. Jackson.
Good morning, Mr. Connor. Good morning, listening audience. Well, I'll start by saying that the Customs Department is streamlining and realizing organizational efficiencies wherever possible. One example is that the recent establishment of a simplified customs clearance process for air travelers. Well, since the second week of November 2016, the Customs Department has been operating a new system, as you alluded to, in the Customs Arrival Hall of the Owen Roberts International Airport. We felt that the previous system was outdated and no longer served customs and the traveling public well. The new system, as you alluded to, is recommended by the World Customs Organization and is commonly known as a red-green system. What it does, it facilitates the flow of passengers and their baggage without reducing the effectiveness of customs control. And essentially how it works is that it allows travelers to choose between two types of channel that has distinctive markings. The green channel is for passengers that are within their allowances and no prohibited restricted goods, no more than 15,000 CI or equivalent in cash or negotiable instruments. The flip side to that is that the red channel are for goods or travelers that have goods that exceed their allowances, goods for business use, prohibited or restricted goods, and more than 15,000 or equivalent in cash or negotiable instruments. The channels are clearly and distinctively signposted so that the choice between them can be easily understood. For example, the green channel is a green sign bearing the shape of an octagon and with the words nothing to declare. The red channel is a red sign bearing the shape of a square with the words goods to declare. The response thus far from travelers has been very positive. And of course, like everything else, we know that there's always room for improvement. Of course, as we go along, we will certainly consider making any alterations as necessary. But we had to do something because, like I said, the previous system was outdated. Obviously, it created a lot of complaints. Of course, as you can understand and appreciate, the volume of travelers have increased. We have the redevelopment of the airport. So we have to prepare ourselves, obviously, for those changes. One of the good things about the new clearance system is that passengers can clear the goods by prepaying duties before making a formal declaration to the customs officer in the rate channel.
And how does that actually work? You basically do you calculate what you have purchased and you know basically the amount of duty that you would pay on it? How does it work?
Yes, obviously you would have to ensure that you have all of your receipts with you. Mm-hmm. You will enter the queue, go directly to the officer. The customs officer at the bench obviously will review what you have declared upon presentation of your receipts. Mm-hmm. You pay your duties, then you can exit, return to collect your baggage, go directly to the officer at the rate channel. The officer then can refer you for X-ray inspection, physical inspection, or directly to the exit without an inspection. This in itself, like I said, certainly expedites the process, and it is expected that most travelers that enter the rate channel will exit without inspection. But I will urge all travelers to ensure that they make a truthful declaration.
As far as the personal allowance is concerned, can for the benefit of our listening and viewing audience, can we mention how much that is and whether or not it relates to families or to individuals within those families?
Right. So it's $350 per person.
Per person.
Per person.
Okay.
Right, yes.
Okay. Yeah. One thing I also want to mention is that, and which is very important, that entering the green channel will be considered a declaration by the traveler that the person has nothing to declare. Obviously, any undeclared goods found during checks will result in either penalties, seizure of the goods, or prosecution, which could lead to imprisonment for failing to make a truthful declaration. So again, it's very important for travelers to understand the new system in terms of being compliant. This new system, basically, like I said, is trying to expedite the flow of travelers. We realize that 95% of travelers are law-abiding citizens. We want to ensure that those individuals who are non-compliant, obviously the main focus then can be placed on those individuals, because we will have individuals that certainly no matter what type of system you put in place, you will always have those individuals obviously that will try to beat the system. Therefore, what this allows is for officers then to place more focus on those individuals who are suspected to be non-compliant.
Okay. Go ahead,
Right.
Mr. Clifford.
And I think it's important for us to reiterate and emphasize the point that this is essentially taking a risk management approach to processing passengers. So no longer will we be asking the same questions to every single passenger coming through. I think once you employ the risk management approach, then you can be much more effective, not just with detecting and preventing contraband from entering the country, but making sure that the government is collecting the revenue that is due to it. So this is a relatively new approach, although it has been tried. I think Mr. Walton would probably mention that as well in the past, but this is the way that most customs organizations in the world operate. And so we are going to fully embrace this system. We believe that we can be much more effective going forward. Yeah.
Are there certain items that you would definitely have to pay duties on, irrespective of whether it falls within the $350?
Well, I think that's correct, but it would. I mean, there are a lot of quite a bit of discussion around what revenue is due on, or what duties are due on, and what may be duty-free items.
Okay.
I don't know if Mr. Walton may want to get into that in more detail.
For example, if I brought in a set of car tires or something like that, would that be dutiable?
Yes. Good morning, Mr.
Good morning,
Connor,
Mr. Walton.
and good morning to the listening public. Just further on to what your question. Business items. If anyone is traveling with goods that are for the business, there are no allowances.
Okay.
Under that. Far as tires are concerned, once it's within your allowances for your personal, you're allowed to import them duty free under your allowance. However, there are environmental charges, $2.50 for each tire.
Okay.
In addition to that.
Okay.
But leading off from the airport into revenue collection, which is our commercial side of our business. I think people have the perception that customs is the airport. The airport only collects approximately 2% of our overall revenue. So that means 98% of our revenue is collected in other places, and that's on the commercial side of customs. We're talking about revenue in a sense. The collector mentioned that we collected $10 million more, $161 million and change. And that consists of over 300,000 imports. And that is a huge task for customs. And I want to say that we must appreciate the amount of work that our officers and support staff do to ensure the free flow of imports across our borders. In most cases, you can clear your goods through customs, collect your goods from the Port Authority in less than a day. In most countries, especially within the region, that process could be over 2 days in some cases. So in all, customs is doing a good job in clearing persons' goods, within a reasonable time. Recently, of course, we have had some challenges, as the collector has stated, with our IT system. And of course, technology is one thing that it should make it a lot easier for us, as far as the time in which we take to clear our goods. However, recently we have had another function that has impacted our trade facilitation at our collections unit, which collects 69% of our revenue, and that is the inspection fees. And I want to make it clear that inspection fees was implemented back in 2012, so this is nothing new. However, they were collected by the shipping agencies for customs since then. However, just recently we had to take the task of collecting them ourselves. And the inspection fees are charged for post-arrival checks, such as documentary checks, physical and non-intrusive inspections. And currently, now that we're having to collect those, it slows down the process a bit more than what it used to be.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off there. Sorry, Mr. because we have to go to our news now. But when we come back, when we return, we will continue the conversation in relation to revenue collection. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My guest with me this morning, Collector of Customs, Mr. Charles Clifford, Mr. Jeff Jackson, and Mr. Kevin Walton, two acting Deputy Collector of Customs. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back immediately after the news. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Collector of Customs, Mr. Charles Clifford. We have two acting Deputy Collectors of Customs, Mr. Jeff Jackson and Mr. Kevin Walton. Earlier in the show, we indicated that we would take calls after the news break. So we're going to open up our phone lines now. While we do that, we're going to continue the conversation with Mr. Kevin Walton, who we had to abruptly interrupt to get to our news. So, Mr. Walton, back to you, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Connor. As I was saying prior to our break, that the inspection fees has impacted our facilitation of trade through our collections unit on commercial imports. The inspection fees relate to arrival checks, pre-arrival, post-arrival checks, documentary checks, physical and non-intrusive inspections. The charges relate to container load and less than container load cargo, which is loose cargo. It's $100 per container, including 20-foot, 40-foot, and flat racks. Also 15 cents per cubic foot for loose cargo. Currently, we have to collect separate payments from the duty for those inspection fees because they're entity fees. Mm-hmm. So that in itself slows down, but we're working to try to collect those fees together. However, as a collector alluded to, that we're having some challenges with our IT system, and we're working diligently to correct those. Currently, we're in the peak season, mm-hmm. Which started in mid-October and runs to mid-April, period of 6 months. As I said earlier, we are talking about over 300,000 imports that customs facilitate. But there are things that individuals can also do, importers can do, to expedite their own clearances. Mm-hmm. And that is completing your declarations to customs, fully completing them as much as you possibly can. The tariff, as we know, 2012, has over 5,652 codes, I think the number is. That in itself is a challenge. However, we have noticed over a period of time, persons have become accustomed to the tariff, the codes that they regularly use. So they have, recorded those codes, have them for the purpose of clearing their goods. We have that said tariff on our website, which is customs.gov.ky. You can go on there. The tariff code is there. Law is there, sorry. You download it, save it to your computer, and you can use Control F and search for items, and the tariff would carry you to basically what they are. However, you have to be specific with the type of goods that you're searching for. Mm-hmm. For example, the words you have to use keywords. Don't use car, use vehicles, for example. And for shoes, look for footwear. And tariff, that search item would carry you to the tariff hidden, and then you can search for the code. We currently use a 8-digit code. And when we speak about the tariff, is a harmonized system tariff that is being used worldwide in most customs organizations around the world. This means that we speak in tariff codes. So if you want to order something from Japan, you don't necessarily have to be able to speak Japanese. You can use the code that we have, and they know basically what it is that you're ordering. That in itself helps to speed up and provides necessary statistics for the government. For example, how much clothing has been imported, etc. In addition to that, it also helps policy decisions as it relates to environment, the impact as far as metals, how much metals, plastics, cardboard has been imported. So the tariff in itself, the objective is it's good. However, there is some challenges with persons becoming accustomed to using it.
Now, when it was first introduced, there were lots of complaints. You hear less and less of that now. So as far as you mentioned earlier, Mr. Walton, that those persons using the system have become more and more accustomed to it now. Two questions. Do you find that most of the clearance when it comes to goods not coming in from the airport but through the seaports or maybe even as air freight are handled by customs brokers, or do most individuals handle their own transactions?
We still have individuals, especially some of the large companies, handling their own transaction. However, I'm glad you mentioned that because we have some good partners as far as customs agencies are concerned. We have Cayman Islands Customs Agency, we have Miracle Brokers, and we have Stamar. And those guys are professionals. They know the tariffs. They know how to clear through customs. We have built relationships over them for the years. And with that, we're able to allow a free flow of goods coming in. In addition to the customs agencies, we also have the couriers, FedEx, DHL, Sprint, NCI, to name a few. Those guys, if you import your goods with them, they actually do the customs clearances for you.
Okay. We have one caller. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. For the Record, Mr. O.C. Connor.
Good morning, Doc. How are you, sir?
Not bad. And good morning, Mr. Clifford.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
And good morning to your guest.
Good morning,
Good morning, sir.
Yeah. Mr. Clifford, I'm very concerned about the proliferation of people entering the country through our borders without customs and immigration controls. And just recently, I think in this morning's paper, there is a story about robbers entered country by boat. And that bothers me because I don't feel comfortable at night in my house when I know now, because it's public knowledge now, that people can come into the country as they feel like by boat any time of the day, any time of the night. And it seems to me that we have very little or no border controls at all. And I have traveled to many, many countries and lived in many countries, several countries, and I have noticed that the border controls are by customs and not by the police. And in fact, I can tell you, I'm not afraid to say that I don't have much confidence in the police with border control because they have not been doing a good job. Because one of the things that I find that not many of them have any seaman's knowledge of the sea. And some of them, I understand, this is what I am told, never been on a boat until they came to Cayman Islands. And the farthest they've been to the sea is by a beach or by a swimming pool or something like that. So I want to start a dialogue next year. I'm not going to start it this year because I know I'm not going to get anywhere with this administration or with the opposition about it. But I want to start a dialogue next year with the view to turning over the border controls to customs, and therefore hire more customs officers because customs have been doing a good job with border controls when they actually were the people controlling the borders. It seems to me that customs is doing a better job in controlling the borders, and I would like to see that duty turned over to customs. It would mean that you would have to bring in more people and train them, like as you did with the police force, and get more people involved in the border control. Because it seems to me that if you can walk into the country, rob people, steal a motor car, have firearms, it means that you can come into anybody's house and kill anybody on the island, and you get to go away too. And that is very dangerous, and that is something that most of the people in higher echelons in the administration of the country don't seem to take very seriously. That's a very serious matter, and I would like to hear your views on it, because I have great confidence in your leadership, in your ability and your leadership, and I know that that you're a man who can get the job done. So that's the reason why I raised it this morning on the show.
Thank you very much, Dr. Macfield. Thank you very much, Mr. Clifford.
Thank you very much, Dr. Macfield, and allow me to take this opportunity to congratulate Dr. Macfield on his recent achievement. I think it's quite significant and long overdue. I want to certainly, again, thank him for his comments on the border protection issue. Some people may not be aware, but the Marine unit that we currently operate is a joint Marine unit. So it is staffed up by police, customs, and immigration, albeit we have a limited number of customs officers and even a smaller number of immigration officers in that unit. So recently we initiated a review of the Memorandum of Understanding between the three agencies with respect to the joint Marine unit, because it is an area that I am particularly concerned about. Dr. Macfield is correct. We do have a significant amount of unprotected coastline, and so that must be a source of concern for us. We have significant assets now, though, and I think it's a question of how we deploy them. As you know, Mr. Connor, when we didn't have the assets that we had now, we were quite successful with respect to some of the border protection activities that we had going on in the past. And we've had some successes now in recent times as well. But I believe that given the resources that we have now compared to what we had back then, that there's an opportunity for significant improvement in our effectiveness. It is a discussion that I started, as I said, with the other two agencies before Commissioner Byrne arrived, and I'm certainly looking forward to continuing the discussion with him. As far as who has ultimate responsibility for that unit in terms of protecting the unprotected coastline, that is more of a policy decision. I suspect that when the time is right, they will be seeking advice from individuals like myself as to which way we should go with that. I am prepared to go in whatever direction the policymakers believe is correct, as long as if it is ultimately going to be customs responsibility, I want to make sure before taking on that kind of responsibility that I have the funding and resources to be effective. Because it's not going to make very much sense to simply shift responsibility from one agency to the next without making some significant changes with respect to resources and how they're deployed. So I'll sort of offer those comments. It is a discussion that I think will have to be had in the months ahead, and we'll see where it leads. But I certainly thank Dr. Macfield for his comments and his confidence in my leadership and in the Customs Department. We will do whatever we can. Of course, we have our control points, the airport, the seaport, and other areas that we have responsibilities for, and we have joint responsibility for the unprotected coastline. But it is an area that clearly anyone who has certain knowledge on it would know that there's an opportunity for improvement, as there is in most areas of government operations.
Okay. Coming back to Mr. Walton now, I'm going to call this a day and life of a container in the Cayman Islands. And for the benefit of our listening and viewing audience, if I am bringing in a container load of stuff in the Cayman Islands, tell me the steps that I would go through from a customs perspective.
From a customs perspective, Mr. Connor, starts on the export side.
Okay.
Meaning where you where you actually export the goods from. The relationship or the purchase as a buyer with the seller must be streamlined properly as far as the necessary invoices provided with the description of the goods and the cost of the goods. That particular document is sent along with your goods to the Cayman Islands. In most cases, it is sent to you, the seller, via electronic email or whatever the case may be. But in some cases, it comes along with the shipping documents to the shipping companies. After that is completed, your responsibility, the first step would be to clear your shipment with the shipping agencies, because you have to pay them. They have basically transported your goods here. So you go to the shipping agency, you pay for your shipping for the goods, get the necessary documentation, and then the next step is to come to customs. We recommend that, because we have online the necessary declaration forms to be completed online, you go on and you can print those forms off, or you can fill them out electronically and have all those completed prior to coming to customs, rather than coming into customs, getting the form, sitting down, completing. So we recommend that persons actually complete those forms prior to coming to customs.
And they can be done online?
Yes, we have the documents online. Okay. You can go on our website, print them off, as well as we have maybe some copies in our office, but we don't keep that much because we're trying to go paperless eventually. Yes. That's one of our visions. Once you complete those forms, you come into customs, may it be at our collection unit or at the parcel post or wherever, and most of the shipments are cleared through our collection unit. We have a system where you actually come into customs, and it depends on the amount of lines. There's a small import, large import, and you select from our Qmatic system what you're importing. May it be a large shipment, small shipment. Have you submitted an electronic declaration to customs? And I want to mention that because we also have the option of submitting electronic declarations to customs. But due to our challenges, we are not, putting any more traders on there at the moment until we get some of those sorted out. But we still have 60% of our clearances through the collections section is submitted electronically to customs, especially through the large agencies such as CICA, Stamar, and America Brokers. They submit to us electronically. That in itself speeds up the process. However, when you're doing a hard copy declaration, you come in, you select from our Qmatic system what the goods are, and you have a seat, and you wait until you're called to customs. Make sure that you have all the supporting documents. In addition to your declarations, you must have the bill of lading, which outlines the type of goods you're importing, the shipping agency, that carrier, whether it be Seaboard, Thompson, or Hydes.
And then once I've finished with the documentation with customs, what's the next step?
Well, it all depends if customs, we want to inspect the goods in some cases as well. We will require a physical inspection. Once you complete the process with customs, the next step would be the Port Authority, where you go and you will get a release from customs, and you will pay for your goods there. And
if you want to inspect, then what would the process be?
In most cases, inspections happen prior to Port Authority, but in some cases, it will happen after. Those inspections will either happen in between or after. Once you're given the authority to deliver, then you're free to go to Port Authority and collect your goods.
Okay. We have one caller. We're going to take that caller. Then we're going to go to a commercial break. And then when we come back, we want to talk more about it. We may want to mention your scanning system that you have in relation to containers. I think, a lot has been invested in that technology as well, and we want to know something about that as well. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Olsen. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, sir. How are you?
Mr. Jackson and Mr. Walton and Mr. Anyway. Clifford, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I just called to say, you need to make those criminals that coming in, You need to make them know that you have good female officers and stop criticizing the officers. They need to stop the crookedness when they come in with this stuff. So, and stop this banging against our officers, because we're doing our job. I want to put them to do the job, and they're doing their job. So you need to make the people out there know what's to be done. Thank you. And the first thing, they got a whole heap of new stuff up inside there. A whole heap of new signs up in the customs, and they got the forms. If they read the back of the form, then they would know what's going on. So thank you and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, caller. One more caller? Caller?
Thank you.
No more callers. We're going to take a commercial break now. When we come back, we'll give the gentleman an opportunity to respond to the caller. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, Mr. Charles Clifford, Collector of Customs, Mr. Jeff Jackson, and Mr. Kevin Walton, two acting Deputy Collectors of Customs as well. And not to want to embarrass any of them, but I have this saying, I hope you don't end up with an Oscar before before either of you end up with the substantive post in terms of the acting position. But I want to give you gentlemen an opportunity to respond to the last caller, and also Mr. Clifford to maybe mention the complaints procedures that you have in customs with any passenger and a customer who's dissatisfied with the service that they receive.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Connor. I want to thank the last caller for his comments. He's right. We have very hard-working officers, very capable officers at all of our sections and points. And sometimes individuals may witness something happening. It could be a search. It could be some other issue with an arriving passenger. I just encouraged the public to consider that they don't have all the information that the officer may have at that time. So while something may not necessarily look correct, and they may wonder why a particular passenger was selected, there's always a reason for it. And I just ask the public to please give our officers the benefit of the doubt. We're not saying for 1 minute that our officers may not make a mistake on occasions. We all do. And so we learn from those mistakes. But I mentioned earlier in terms of how we process passengers that we're embracing the risk management approach. And what that means is that you will see individuals selected from time to time, and people may question why it was done. Just be aware that you don't have all of the information that the officer has available to him or her. And that should be a part of your consideration in terms of how you respond to it as someone who has witnessed a particular incident. There was another point, Mr. Connor, that you mentioned. It just escaped me. That you wanted me to address just a few minutes ago. I know we both gotten a little bit.
Yes. We wanted to talk about the how you deal with containers and the new technology that you have in relation to scanning.
Yeah,
and then maybe on that we can talk about something about outgoing goods as well, because we in the past heard complaints about stolen items leaving the islands by boat, and whether or not customs actually check outgoing containers, outgoing vessels as they do incoming ones.
Right. So I'm going to ask Mr. Jackson, Mr. Walton to address those issues, but I just remembered what the other issue was that you wanted me to address. And that was sort of general complaints in relation to the conduct of officers. And what we have now is essentially, we have an HR manager, of course. So most of the complaints would go to the HR manager, who would then funnel them to whatever area they need to go to. Mm-hmm. But what we also done recently in terms of the restructuring of the Customs Department is that we've created a complaints and professional standards unit. So something similar to what the police service has in place. But that is still very much in its infancy. So we're looking at that issue. We're building the policies out around that. We're not quite ready to roll that out yet, but that will be the structure through which formal complaints would come in the future. We want to make sure that we have a robust system in place for dealing with complaints and making sure that we maintain professional standards within the Customs Department. Yeah. So those would be my comments in relation to that.
Okay. Who wants to talk about the scanning system? How you deal with incoming as well as outgoing?
I'll take that question, Mr. Connor. The extra equipment provide an effective means to verify the contents of either an imported, exported, in transit, or standard vehicle that corresponds to the manifest, and to ensure that it does not conceal any prohibited or restricted items, and of course to safeguards government's revenue. Since the acquisition of the systems, it has proven to be very effective in terms of efficiency. Whereas prior to the acquisition, customs was conducting an average of or inspecting an average of 10 containers per month. Now we are inspecting an average of between 90 to 100 containers per day. That is significant. We were actually doing imports, exports that didn't pretty much require the necessary time to inspect those containers. What we have in place now is the technology that gives us that capability. The machines have proven to be effective in terms of not only interdicting contraband and weapons, but has also curbed the export of stolen goods out of the country. Of course, oftentimes people ask the question, well, why are we so concerned about exports? Well, if we don't conduct inspections on exports, we are setting ourselves, we are putting ourselves in a position where the integrity of these islands can be compromised. We have a responsibility to ensure that we are not only protecting what is imported, but we have a responsibility and an obligation in terms of what is exported. One of the key features of the equipment as well is that it has the capacity to detect radiation. Of course, we're very concerned about terrorism. We have to do everything possible to ensure that whatever leaves this country does not create any harm to other countries that the containers are being exported to. So, in a sense, the equipment is very, very effective, has proven to be very effective. And one of the important things that we need to also realize is that it is a deterrent, and you cannot measure deterrence. And yes, we still have some ways to go to fully realize the capabilities of the system, and in time we will achieve those capabilities. I also want to point out as well that we have a new building that's where construction is currently ongoing. We hope to have that building completed in March next year. This is something that is certainly will be welcomed by the operators of the equipment. Currently, they have to work in very unfavorable conditions. The new building will house the equipment to protect it from the elements of the weather, and also to house staff. This is something that we certainly have been looking forward to for quite some time, and the collector, Mr. Clifford, since he took up the position, he ensured that project was pushed through. So we have a lot to thank him for in that regard. But like I said, overall, the equipment has proven to be very effective, and will continue to do everything possible for it to realize its full capacity and potential.
Okay. Gentlemen, some persons have registered their surprise that when declaring items and the cost of items, that they didn't realize that the taxes that you pay in other countries, in particular in the U.S., that you do not include that in the $350 CI dollars per person that you're allowed.
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Connor. You've paid taxes at the point of purchase, and so you would not need to include those taxes in your in calculating your duty-free allowance. Were you to do that, you'd be paying taxes twice essentially, and that wouldn't be fair. So I think that's important for people to recognize when they're putting together their declarations. They can essentially leave off for those declarations the taxes that they've paid at the point of purchase.
Okay, and how do we assure the traveling public that the Red Green is there to facilitate your smooth movement through customs as opposed to entrap you? They have been given an opportunity to make their declaration. How do we reassure the public that if you do what you're supposed to do, there should be no problem?
Well, if you're in compliance in terms of always making a truthful declaration and by following the signage, you shouldn't experience any problems. But just to kind of go over some of the items that we discussed early on in terms of how the system works, is that the green channel is for travelers who have with them no more than the duty-free allowances, no prohibited or restricted goods, no more than 15,000 CI or equivalent in cash or negotiable instruments. The rate channel allows travelers to have with them goods that exceed their allowances, goods for other persons, goods for business use, prohibited or restricted goods, and again, if they have with them more than the $15,000 CI or equivalent in cash. Again, it's also important to remind the listening audience that when entering the green channel, is ensure that you have all of your receipts, that your declaration form has been fully completed, and if any goods are found, obviously it can result in forfeiture of the goods, penalties, prosecution, which can lead to imprisonment. We do not expect that the system will, or the travelers will get adjusted to the system instantly. It certainly will take time, for them to get used to the altered system. But again, it is something that we certainly look forward to in terms of ensuring that the flow of passengers and their baggage is expedited through the airport as quickly as possible. Of course, bearing in mind again, we have a responsibility to ensure that our borders are protected and to ensure that travelers are compliant.
So nothing to declare, the green line, nothing to declare. You should still have your receipts to substantiate the claim that you're making in terms of how much you've spent.
Yes, you should have your receipts readily available, even if you're within your allowance.
Right.
To at least to satisfy the officer upon entering the green channel that you're still within your allowance. And bear in mind that under normal circumstances, we don't expect there to be much checks, but the travelers are still subject to being inspected.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Clinton.
And I should also add, Mr. Connor, that the passengers have a huge responsibility in helping us to make this work as well.
Mm-hmm.
To give you an example, if someone has decided to come through the green line, that's an indication, that's essentially a declaration that they have nothing to declare because they're coming through the green channel. If that person has been away for a day or 2 days and is coming through that line with 6, 7 suitcases, that's sort of an indication to the officer that something isn't right here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is certainly going to provide justification for that officer to look at the person closely, to do a secondary check. Because there may be some legitimate reason for that, but it certainly would create a red flag. So if people are not prepared to essentially be honest about their declarations, it is going to create a further delay for them. So it's important for us to make the point that we are making these changes at the airport, but in order for it to work effectively, then the onus is certain on the passenger in terms of making an honest declaration.
Exactly. We have one caller, and we're going to a commercial break. But Ms. Susan, can we take the caller first? Oh, we have to go to a commercial break. So we're going to ask that caller to please hang in there because we have to get this commercial in before 9 o'clock. So please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We have one caller. I also have an email as well with a few questions, but we're going to take the caller first. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, gentlemen. Peter Schmidt here.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Sir.
Good morning.
I'm fine. Thank you for asking. I hope the same for you. A couple of questions I have on customs matters, if you don't mind. There seems to have been proliferation of illegal guns, I guess mostly handguns, on the island. Could either one of the gentlemen indicate, perhaps after I hang up, what success they're having in detecting the either importation or attempted importation of illegal firearms? With regards to the export controls, I wonder what success they may experience in identifying stolen property that might be loaded onto vessels or containers and attempted to ship out of the country. I do not import very many things, but a few months, maybe a year ago, I did import a few items for family use, and it was like bicycles and some furnishings and stuff like that. And I find it as a infrequent importer, I found it very difficult to identify the correct codes. I wonder if it would be possible to devise the system, a computer system, in such a way that the customer, and I guess that would primarily be a person like myself that does not avail themselves of those services very often, where you could enter the item in a computer, like a search word, and the computer would give you the correct code, like let's say bicycle, and it would bring up the correct code, and then, for instance, the next person could say electric bicycle, which means the bicycle that has an electric motor to drive it, and it would bring up the correct code just to bring up something that is actually close. They're both bicycles, but one is powered, one is not, and the system would know how to differentiate. And finally, one comment, and again, this harks back to the time when I would go through customs almost on a daily basis. I understand that law enforcement jobs are very trying on the people that have to do them, and it's often very difficult for them. Many of them are working with problems in staffing levels, and maybe have long shifts, etc. And it is difficult to be courteous to somebody when to a client, if you want to call it that, or a passenger, when you suspect they may be trying to evade the regulations. But I do believe with such a high amount of tourists coming to Cayman, it is one of the first contacts that a visitor will have with a Caymanian, because I think probably 100% of the customs personnel is probably Caymanian. And I believe it is very important that even when the circumstances are trying, that those officers can be courteous. And I have seen some officers do some highly indelicate things, especially when ladies were concerned that had their luggage examined. It could, I felt like sinking into the floor because I consider them, I am part of this community, and I really hated seeing what transpired. Now, these are isolated cases, very isolated, but nevertheless, I think it is highly important that those officers even when they're under strain and have their own problems like everybody does, they must have a professionalism that is a credit to the country. And I thank you. I will listen on the radio for your responses.
Thank you very much, caller. You raised some very, very important points. I'm not sure whether you were listening from earlier, but we did address a number of them earlier. But I'm going to ask Mr. Jackson and Mr. Walton to reiterate some of those points. But just generally, before they get into the detail, I just wanted to address a few of the points that you've made. In relation to firearms, yes, we've had some successes at our various control points with scanning bags and in particular detecting ammunition that may have been left in carry-on bags, as an example, or checked luggage. So we've had some success with that, but we also spoke in some detail earlier about the significant amount of unprotected coastline that we have. And of course, we have drug boats coming in. We've caught some and we haven't caught others, of course. Many times when we seize drugs that are coming in through our unprotected coastline, we will also seize firearms. And when I say we now, I'm talking about the Joint Marine Unit, Police, Customs and Immigration. So we have had some successes. Can we have more? Could we be more effective? Of course. We spoke about improvements in that area, and we have to make sure that we're more effective. So we'll be moving on to making improvements in that regard. As far as stolen property is concerned, Mr. Jackson had mentioned earlier the importance of scanning outgoing containers. So yes, we've had some success with respect to the detection of stolen property that's been leaving the country. And as far as the recommendations that the caller has made with respect to various codes in terms of clearing shipments at our collections point, Mr. Walton will address that again and repeat some of the points that he made previously. But just general on that last point, I'd say that while we do have the IT platform issues that I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we also have, as Mr. Walton referenced earlier, the fact that we've moved from several hundred codes some years ago, I think it was in 2013, to over 5,000 codes now. So those two things, that issue coupled with the new IT platform has sort of converged to create a lot of the customer service issues that we're having now, but we are working diligently to address those issues. So I'd ask Mr. Walton, Mr. Jackson, if they could expand on those points for me.
Yes, I will expand more on the imports of personal goods he had alluded to as far as the searching for codes. In addition to our website where we have our tariff law, as I explained earlier, you can download that and save it on your computer and use Control F to search for certain imports. But you must input the specific information, because the material, not really because what it's called by or what it's referred to. For example, instead of using car, you use vehicles. Mm-hmm. Instead of using shoes, you use footwear.
So if you put car in, you're not likely to get a pop-up?
No. You would have to go to vehicles, for example.
Okay.
Same thing with shoes. But in addition to our law that you can download, we also have traces.gov.ky that you can also use for searches. That Traces is our portal that you use for electronic submission. You could actually go on to Traces, that's traces.gov.ky, and use that as a search tool as well by typing in the necessary information. But further to that, we have Zumba.com that is used worldwide to search the tariff. As I say, the tariff is the same worldwide because it's a harmonized system tariff. And we also have the WTO, which is World Trade Organization .org, to do such searches. So these are various tools that you can use to basically search for codes electronically. And
okay.
As the collector said, we have some challenges with our technology systems right now. But as we go forward, we're going to be, having them to become more user-friendly and offer more services as far as tariff searches, etc.
I think, and what the caller probably has expectations of is that, for instance, if you use a Google search now, it's almost any word that you put in will prompt something, and whether or not you can have a system that is much more user-friendly and not not so much set in stone that if you don't have the right word in, you're not likely to come up with it. We have 2 callers, but we also have an email that came in, and the email, the writer congratulates Mr. Clifford and his senior management in relation to the improvements that they have made. And then he has some questions. One, when deciding whom or what to inspect, is the decision-making process whichever officer must follow equal to those used by major international customs policies, such as those used in the UK? And then the other question was on the complaint procedure. If a citizen or a company that operates locally is dissatisfied with the response from customs to a complaint, is their method of appeal outside of customs of the customs system, or is there no method of appeal, excluding, of course, judicial review?
But can I just, on that final question, I'll
Sure.
just say that, of course, there is the Complaints Commissioner's Office. So if a complaint has been made to customs in relation to the conduct of one of our officers or more than one of our officers, then if the complainant isn't satisfied with the response, then he or she can take that matter up with the Complaints Commissioner's Office.
Mm-hmm.
In relation to the other matters that you raised, or that the emailer raised,
When deciding.
I'd ask Mr. Jackson or Mr. Walton or both of them if they would address those issues.
Yes, I will start. I think Mr. Jackson is going to expand on what I say. Cayman Islands Customs, being a member of the Caribbean Customs Law Enforcement Council, associated with the World Customs Organization, we use methodologies that are used in most modernized countries as it relates to intelligence-led risk management to make selective decisions as far as high risk, medium to low risk, and we conduct our processes accordingly. In addition to the intelligence-led risk management methodology that we use, we also have a compliance management process. In addition to physical inspection, we also have non-intrusive inspections, which Mr. Jackson explained earlier. Instead of actually physically checking the goods, we use our scanners to scan to determine what's the contents inside those goods, especially containers. Further to that, we also have our K9 unit that we use to do checks as far as firearms and drugs, etc. Mr. Jackson will probably expand on that. But to the writer's question, yes, we do use modernized processes as it relates to intelligence-led risk management, compliance management, and also technology, which we are now trying to improve and advance on as we go along.
Okay, we have 3 callers, so let's see if we can take those calls. We're going to ask the callers to be as brief as possible because we want to accommodate everyone. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Good morning, you gentlemen, Mr. Clifford, and your staff, whatever, Mr. OC.
Morning.
I don't call in very often, but when I find a need to call in, I think it's important. That I think important is important enough, I do. I did call in last week, I think it was, pertaining the treatment that not only me but other people saw of a lady in a wheelchair that came in on the last flight from Miami at night.
Yes.
It was very obvious that I don't know whether the officer had any particular reason to do so, but it seemed like they were going through every item in the 3 suitcases that the lady had. To me, it was very humiliating for the lady. I don't know, as I say, whether there was any reason why such scrutiny was going on, but it was so, to me, as I say, so humiliating, and so many people were seeing what was happening. I would have thought that if an examination, inspection, or whatever had to be done to that regard, in that regard, the person should have been taken into a more private area. Tourists and Caymanians alike, residents, stood there for a long time. This person was in line, was being inspected there, while on another officer's line, about 8 or probably 10 people went through before that one was finished. I had goods to declare. I always do. If I have, regardless of what it is, I will declare, and I pay my dues. I also agree that a lot of people come in with probably many suitcases or boxes or whatever and go in a lane or line with nothing to declare. I don't really think that they're being 100% honest, and that no doubt that should be looked into. But the main thing I would say is, in the eyes of the public, or those that are coming in, the passengers, something should be a little more private if they're going to go to the extent of inspection that they were doing, that lady was doing, or that officer was doing to that lady. So I agree what's happening maybe in the customs department is a lot of improvements, and I congratulate you all, but I would look into this. Someone spoke to a supervisor, and the supervisor went and spoke to the officer, and I don't know if it made any difference or not, but it was really humiliating for that person, and with everybody standing there, and so many went through. The other officer couldn't have been doing everything wrong either. So I would just like if that you'd look into that type of thing happening. I have no idea who the person was or anything, no more than what I saw with my eyes, and I think that could be improved a lot. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, caller. Before you answer that, let's take one more caller as well. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Connor, and good morning to your guest.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And I'd like to say thank you to the previous caller, because I was the person in the wheelchair, and at least we have one person who has come forward and has spoken the truth and has seen it through the eyes of what all of the other people have seen it through, although they didn't call the talk show. What I couldn't help listening to this morning, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm listening, and we're all subject to interpreting what we hear, because it's not the message that is sent, but how it's received that matters. And what I've heard this morning is a defense of what the officers do at that airport, whether it's right or wrong. The passengers, it's their responsibility to do everything to make sure the officers don't get any blame. What was done to me was humiliating, is an understatement. And that officer was not looking generally. That officer was specifically looking for something. And what I would like the Collector Customs to tell me on the air, since it was already said on the air, what category of criminal am I red flagged in, so that I will be able to put that on my customs form the next time, and it can save any officer who has to screen me the time of waiting for over an hour in the line behind me to get through. And what the caller just now didn't know is that when I was eventually able to leave the customs line, and let me just point out, I was only the second person that went to that officer, and I was sent to that officer. I didn't choose to go there. I was sent there by the supervisor up at the top of the line because I came in a wheelchair. So what that caller didn't know is that by the time I was finished, there were only 4 people left in the airport. And one more thing I'd like to add for the listening public and for those in your studio this morning, I travel medically. And if this is how I am going to be treated, then at least I should be told up front, because then I will stop traveling medically. I'll stay on the island, because I will not be subjected to this kind of humiliation. I'm a policeman's daughter, and I was raised with law and order in my home, and at my age, I am not about to break laws or to introduce criminal activity into my life. And I would like people to respect me for the way they have seen me carry myself and live my life. I do not have as much as a driving offense attached to my name, and they can Google that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, caller. And I did encourage that caller to either call or write to the Collective Customs expressing their concerns and dismay at what occurred. And I still encourage that caller to do that. And I would imagine that the collector would endorse, what I have said in that regard. But I will give him an opportunity to say that as well. We're going to take a commercial break. We still have 2 calls and we have lots of questions to answer, gentlemen. So for the record, we'll be back immediately after this short break. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I just want to say to the 2 callers that we have on hold, please hang in there. We're going to give our guests an opportunity to respond to the last 2 callers that we had, and then we will be coming back to you. So hang in there for us, please. We don't want to lose you. Mr. Clifford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Connor. I just want to thank the last 2 callers for bringing that issue to my attention. I wasn't aware of that, but I want to say to the later caller that her interpretation of what I said earlier in relation to the officers and their conduct and how we process passengers and the new system that we've put in place, that she has misinterpreted that. I wasn't saying that at all. In fact, I was saying quite the opposite. We all make mistakes at times, and I'm not saying that an officer made a mistake in any particular case. What I'm saying is that we all make mistakes at times, and we learn from those mistakes. Now, if this lady was subjected to a secondary search, then that certainly should have been taken place offline and not in the view of, if it's a detailed search, it shouldn't be in the view of all of the other arriving passengers. So that's an issue that I would like very much to find out more detail about in terms of the date that the passenger arrived, the flight that she arrived on. I know who the passenger is, and I will be giving her a call at some point today to get that information. And I would certainly ask, once I have that information, I would ask Mr. Jackson to look into the situation. He is responsible for border protection. I'm not going to pass any judgments on any of my officers without having all of the information available. So we'll have to look at that to see precisely what happened. But I'll ask Mr. Jackson whether he would like to give some additional comments at this point.
Yes, thank you, caller, for sharing your concerns on this matter. It's certainly not the ideal customer service that the Customs Department promotes or believe in. We certainly take your complaint very seriously, and I can assure you that the matter will be investigated. And any findings of wrongdoings on the part of the officer or unprofessional conduct will surely be dealt with. At this time, I'm really sorry and apologize for any inconveniences and mistreatment you may have experienced. And I can assure you that it will be investigated and acted upon accordingly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. Let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Thanks for being so patient.
Okay, sir. Morning, Mr. O.C.
Morning, sir.
The collector, Mr. Clifford. Good morning, Mr. Jackson. Mr.
Good morning, sir.
The deputies here.
Good morning. Good morning, sir.
Subject near and dear to my heart. I won't start a long conversation with it, but it would take a long time to explain many of the things. My first job was doing customs work in Jamaica, and that's one job I really kept back till I left. And very complex there, as I'm sure you all are aware, at that time. This is 50-odd years ago, up to 50 years ago, 49 years ago. And lots of things. I'm glad you mentioned about customs brokers, because at that time, I don't know how more or different it is right now there. No ordinary person could attempt to fill out an entry. I can tell anybody that. It took me about 5 months to really get the hang of everything, but I did a lot of different work. And at that time, customs, we handled export to a big, significant, a giant corporation I worked for. But people thought I worked with the government because handling the bond stores and all that, I did ex-warehouse and inter-warehouse. And I had huge bonds. It required me to spend a lot of time with customs, with invoice inspectors and so forth, with our books to get it, equaled up with the government's records and so forth. And it was very complex. I won't go into all that. But I'm glad you mentioned about the brokers, because no ordinary person would do it. I was allowed to do a little sideline work. It didn't interfere that my boss gave me permission, was there to do that for people because people couldn't clear things themselves at all. Particularly if you didn't have proper invoices, the bill of site, the landing rate at the dock, after carefully paid your an invoice inspection down at customs, it might be much different now. He could turn the entry down then, so you'd have to go back and so forth. Then, if you didn't have proper invoices, you had to get a surveyor one. I know you all know that is a senior customs to go and do a bill of site with you, and then go back to make it whatever he valued it at, so forth. Whatever you're bringing in, importing, particularly cars and all that. But what Mr. McField says, so I understand the significance of it. The myriad amounts of item numbers you have now, a tariff item number, that's what they had there too. And it created, as I said, an ordinary person could not possibly fill out a cup. He had to use, and I'm glad to see the brokers, and I'm glad to see people are using them because it streamlines the purpose. That's what they're there for. They know what they're doing. I'm glad Mr. McPhee mentioned about customs being involved with border patrols. It was that way in Jamaica at the time. They did that. They even gave clearances to ships leaving. And you had to go through customs to, Jamaican-owned vessels and all that. Leaving them must clear at the customs house at the time. And the customs officers there was the enforcement part and there was the marine part. Because as well as you knew the officers very well. And they were all armed. From then they were armed and they did a significant job. There is border patrol there now. Of course, you have the Jamaican Defence Force with big patrol vessels, gunboats, and so forth. But I thought what Mr. McField said is very, very relevant and serious. They should be out there involved with it. Hire more officers. Spare no expense to protect our borders. Spare no expense, and they should be armed. I won't put that to you to find out whether they're armed or not, but I assume they are, and they should be all armed. Thank you very much for giving me the chance. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, caller. We're going to go to our last caller this morning. Don't say the last one. Oh, that means that we're open for more. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Connor, and good morning, Chucky, Kevin, and Jeff.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning,
I
ma'am.
just want to say that I think that, of all the government agencies, you do a good job, and you do keep things in check for us. But I'm really sorry about what happened to that lady. Sometimes people have a bad day, and they inflict it on you unnecessarily. Things like that can happen. But I would suggest that maybe you work it into your next budget year to install cameras right above your custom officers as you enter, when you come into the airport, or maybe at the port, or wherever customs have to be present in a stationary situation, that can also not just record the photo or the picture of what is taking place, but the sound. We as a country have to modernize ourselves. We must. And in doing so, we must also have accountability to ourselves and to the people of the country. Therefore, we would have the proof who said what responses came from the officer, what responses came from the passenger in situations like this. And the entire scenario can be documented. I have no problem with that. If I was coming through, I would want to know that, everything is being accountable, in that kind of situation if I'm ever pulled aside and I'm dug up or whatever. And I, as a passenger, is very good to my custom officers because when I travel, I ensure that my purchases are in separate packages, luggage from what I took with me. So when I hand them the receipts and the form, I say, look, these are my 2 suitcases. They have the stuff I purchased in them, and the other suitcases are what I took with me. So I try to make my life easy as well as their life. And I can understand the lady, being very frustrated. You're in a wheelchair. You're probably very sick. You've gone away for treatment, and you're coming back home. And, you just want to get home, and to be held in that kind of a position for such a long time and not being well, no, I don't agree with that. I think that we have to, at some point, have some empathy for those individuals as passengers. And, if they're a frequent medical passenger, then, you know, we have to show some kind of leniency in some parts as well. I'm not saying that if they're bringing in stuff that needs to be declared that they shouldn't have the opportunity to, you know, for the officer to investigate, check that. But what I'm saying is we have to also be mindful that sick people just want to get home. Thank you, and you guys do a good job. And like I say, we need to modernize our facility. So get some cameras in there, Mr. Clifford, that documents the responses, the sound is there. You have your accountability. That way you don't have to have any questions hanging over your head. Thank you.
Thank you very much, caller.
Point well taken, caller. We have one more call, and I think that person is on a paid call, and this will be our final call as well. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Pleasant good morning, sir. And to your guests, awesome job at the customs. I have been on the receiving end and also just like that lady, but not to that extent. And the suggestion about an extra room with the improvement of the airport and everything, that would be ideal. However, my point this morning is on a different note. It's regarding what you are allowed to take in. Regarding the price of everything now, your ticket to go away, I think there should be some consideration as to putting our limit at $500.
Yes, I did make that suggestion one time to the minister when he was here as well.
No, but that has to be addressed because the cost of going away, the ticket alone, you know, they're saying buy local, yes, the people who go, everything is made overseas. And the people who bring the things in for you to buy, they are putting whatever price they want to make. You can go from store to store and the prices varies from time to time. Not in the interest of the customer at no point. You understand? So if you go away and you buy a ticket for $400 or $500, you should be allowed to bring back something that you can use.
Good point,
it's all
caller.
well and good for us to support local, but remember, everybody know what the cost of living here is and what you earn and what you can afford to spend.
And you think about $500 CI would be a reasonable amount?
That would be very reasonable. It would be because you still have to pay tax on your excess when you come in.
Right.
But
okay.
I'm saying regarding your ticket and all of that, you know, it has been there for a while, so why are you moving everything else up and the ceiling is still on what you can bring in?
Okay.
You know, across the board is fine, okay?
Thank you very much, caller. We'll see whether or not the collector or his deputies...
Mr. Clifford, you know, he's doing a good job, so you just have to carry it through. You can't do half a good job. He has to do a good job across the board.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll see if the collector can give an estimate in terms of if it were to be increased by $150, how much in lost revenue that would translate to the government. And of course, when it comes to policy, you know, he's not allowed to make policy in that regard, but certainly we can get his take on it.
I'm sure.
Yes.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you very much,
You're
caller.
welcome.
Yeah, Mr. Connor, we had a sort of offline discussion about this issue earlier this morning, and I remember doing some calculations on this some time ago, but I know that it would be a few $1 million that would be lost as a result. But it's a policy decision that the government will have to consider. I think they considered it some time ago. They may wish to revisit that at some point. Yes, there would be an impact on revenue, as I indicated, but part of the consideration, I suspect, for the policymakers would be how do you weigh that against the amount of goodwill that you would get as a result of changing the policy. So going forward, we'll see whether there's a move to increase the duty-free allowance, but I just want to reiterate the point that that's not my decision.
Yeah.
We don't have the authority to either increase or decrease fees and import duties. That's a matter for the policymakers. So to the extent that we can assist with any technical advice, we're certainly prepared to do so.
And then, of course, we don't know how much pushback you're likely to receive from entities like the Chamber of Commerce, because merchants as well, you know, they may not want to go along with it.
And I think in terms of making the policy decision, the government would consult the merchants and other stakeholders, because you have to put all of that into the consideration pot, so to speak, before you make such a decision. So we'll see what happens going forward.
Okay. Now, we had lots of observations, lots of questions raised, and I'm going to just put one more into the pot. I'm not sure how much time they're going to allow us to go over. But again, you mentioned we're coming to that time of the season, the festive season. You've seen, increase already in the amount that customs is collecting at the port of entry, at airport in relation to goods coming in. The question of gifts being brought in. You'll have family members who are residing overseas coming to stay with relatives for the Christmas season, bring in gifts for them. I have had friends, for instance, come from New York, and this was not even in the Christmas season during the summer, and they were asked, are you bringing any gifts for family members? What's the policy when as it relates to bringing gifts in for family members? Especially those persons who are non-resident here.
Right. It's certainly a frequent question that we received, and especially in the recent past. And I'll ask Mr. Walton or Mr. Jackson or both of them to address that point.
Yeah. The current tariff law don't allow a gift allowance. Prior to that, we used to have up to $50. However, officers do use some discretion depending on the amount. As a visitor here, as a resident, and you travel, and you would still fall within your allowance.
Right.
I think some of the thing that is kind of unpleasant is when you wrap your gifts and you come into customs and we open them again. That is kind of unpleasant for some passengers. And then suggestion with that is to avoid wrapping them if possible. If you do wrap them, have a clear description of what's inside the package for the officers, and provide the receipt, as Mr. Jackson has explained, to give a description and what is inside in order to satisfy the officer without them having to open the gifts.
But they will have to pay a duty on that.
If you're
a non-resident?
If a non-resident, yes. As a resident, you would fall within
your $350.
Yes.
Right. Okay, gentlemen, we've had a very exciting morning. Lots of calls coming in. I hope that you've had an opportunity to cover all of the areas that you wanted to cover, but we also give you an opportunity to have some closing comments as well. And in those closing comments, you may want to include anything that you think is of importance to our listening audience and viewing audience as well. Let's start with Mr. Jackson, and we'll leave the collector let him have the last say.
All right, thank you. Customs has a multifaceted and complex mission of protecting our borders against a multitude of violations. As for border protection, our enforcement priority is always to prevent prohibited and restricted goods from entering the country. And of course, we are increasingly being challenged by criminals who engage in illegal activities ranging from imports of drugs and weapons, fraud, and other violations. However, we are now focusing on capacity building as a holistic process that will result in sustainable changes through training, mentoring, and the infusion of resources that will be long-term, comprehensive, and a repetitive process to improve our ability to carry out our functions effectively. We intend to achieve this by enhancing officers' skills, competencies, tools, processes, and resources to meet these challenges. Of course, one of our priorities is to raise the level of officers in terms of professionalism. We have some very, very hardworking officers who are dedicated, committed, and always try to carry out the tasks at hand. Of course, we know we have a few that perhaps are lacking a bit behind in terms of professional standards. But in time, we will certainly address those. Yes, we recognize that we have deficiencies that need to be remediated. And with the collector's leadership, we are certainly trending in the right direction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Walton.
Yes. We do realize that we have some incidents as far as customer service, as most people may put it. Those issues have been dealt with over time, and we are committed to continuing to train our officers up to the level as far as professional conduct on the job. It's quite difficult to draw the line when you enforcing laws at the same time providing a service. And for areas like the airport where we're facilitating tourism, for example. It's very important that our officers remain professional in the clearance of tourists, especially across our borders, not, of course, excluding the fact of our residents. We must go about it in the same approach. On the commercial import side, we do realize that we have challenges there as well, because it's a large part of our business process. As I said earlier, it's over 300,000 imports yearly, so of course we're going to have challenges as we go along during that period. However, our vision moving forward is to modernize our business processes using technology. For example, I'll give you a snapshot of it. I see the collector looking at me, so I'll continue. Far as decorations, we want to move away from the hard copy decorations. We want to move where we can use technology to submit electronically to customs. Anywhere in the world, globally, you can submit a decoration to customs, may it be where you are. For example, if you're planning to travel to the Cayman Islands, you could actually submit your decorations prior to arriving here in your hotel room. If you're importing a vehicle, for example, you could be sitting in Europe and make your decorations to customs. Of course, we have certain management systems in place to ensure that we manage those, because facilitation must be balanced with control. Further to that, having that sort of platform would enhance our customer service, will enhance the abilities to facilitate our trade. As we go along, we want to also enhance our business processes in addition to the technology. So we're currently in a change management transition as it relates to, modernizing our processes. In the interim, as we go forward, we're encouraging compliance. We're building partnerships with our traders, and we'll continue to do so, and allowing them to have certain, privileges in order to allow us to facilitate and concentrate, as Mr. Jackson has said, on the individuals who are considered to be high risk, and use that methodology going forward.
Okay, Mr. Clifford?
Mr. Connor, I know you're running short on time, but Mr. Walton and Mr. Jackson did such an excellent job at summing up the discussion that I don't have very much more to say other than to thank you for having us on the program. I'd like to thank the callers, both the callers that were complimentary as well as those who had complaints. It's all valuable to us, and we will look into the complaints and address those. I want to, again, in wrapping up, thank all of the customs officers, not just the officers, but all of our admin staff, our warehouse staff, our porters. They all play a very important role in making this operation work. And they all have played an important role in all of the achievements that we've managed to accomplish over the last several months. So thank them very much. Going forward, we would like to certainly engage the public more, because we recognize that the public, we serve the public. You know that I come from a background of not just law enforcement, but tourism. So customer service is important to me, and it's an area that we need to bring greater focus to. We have tourism as one of our major industries here, so we need to balance that with, as Mr. Walton and Mr. Jackson pointed out, making sure that we have effective controls in place. So again, thank you very much, and I look forward to coming back on the program in the future.
Certainly, and we look forward to having you as well. I also want to thank our listening audience and our viewing audience as well for allowing us into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work as well. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need and not necessarily those who want. And with the upcoming festive season, we want you to be even more attentive to the needs of those who are less fortunate than we are as well. I want to encourage you to continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Sterling Dwayne Ebanks at 12 noon for Talk Today. Have a great day, and as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three wonderful, beautiful Cayman Islands.
For the Record is brought to you by Caribbean.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534 8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.